As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed softly, Her eyes were fixed straight on me. While other employees were still around, Emily opened her mouth as if she had made up her mind. "Mr. Turner, do you have any time available during your stay in the US?" Faced with her imploring look, I was taken aback, but her earnest gaze made me instinctively nod. "My name is Adam Turner, 42 years old. I work in IT. Today, I am traveling by plane. I wonder how she's doing right now. Every time I board a plane, I always remember a child. 22 years ago, I had been accepted to a university in Japan and was on a plane to move there. A girl, about 10 years old, was sitting next to me, and next to her, a man who seemed to be her father, was struggling to put her to sleep. It's really hard to sleep on planes, isn't it?" While empathizing with the girl who couldn't sleep, I spent my time reading a book. Eventually, I started hearing the girl's snores, and her father seemed relieved and fell asleep as well. Although I was too excited and hopeful about the new world to feel sleepy, I put on an eye mask to at least rest my eyes. Just then, I heard the sound of sniffles from next to me. Quietly, I took off my eye mask and looked next to me to see the girl silently crying. I was surprised and whispered to her, "What's wrong?" Since everyone else was asleep, I asked her in a hushed tone. "I'm scared," the girl answered in a low voice. "Scared of what?" I asked gently. "My brother's surgery." Upon further inquiry, I learned that her brother was undergoing a major operation in Japan, and she was traveling to Japan to be with him. I'd hate for my brother to be gone. This kind-hearted girl was anxious about the possibility of losing her brother if the surgery did not succeed, and this had made it impossible for her to sleep. I tried to offer words of encouragement, but they didn't seem to stop her tears. That's it. I got an idea and rummaged through my bag. Then, I pulled out a small game console. "Do you like games?" I asked quietly, and the girl nodded, so I placed the game console in her hands. "Try playing this." She began operating the game console with a look of bewilderment. In fact, this game console was one I had made myself. Ever since middle school, I had dreamed of being involved in game development, and during high school, as I was exploring my career path, a university in Japan became an option. While studying for the entrance exams, I made this small game console. Now, the girl was playing on the very first portable game console I had built from parts. It was a very simple shooting game, but she became absorbed in playing it. It seemed to make her tears recede. Since it was simple, she was able to complete it quickly. When she completed it, she turned the screen towards me with a satisfied smile. "What does it say here?" she asked, and I leaned in to look. My name, Adam Turner." In general, when you complete a game, the names of the staff who worked on it scroll across the screen. I mimicked that and programmed it to display my name when completed. But now that I showed it to the girl again, I felt a bit embarrassed. I found myself blushing slightly. "Adam, is your name Adam?" I blushed a bit again. At this point, I just went with it. "Yay, sounds strong, right? It can even beat your brother's illness." I waved my fists around to show her. The girl watched my gesture, and her eyes lit up. "Really, can it cure his illness?" Her voice was a bit loud, and her father, who had been sleeping next to her, woke up. The father was surprised to see his daughter awake and felt embarrassed that I had been entertaining her, repeating his thanks several times. "It's okay, I was getting bored too." Embarrassed about having woken up, the father readjusted the blanket over his daughter, urging her to go back to sleep quickly. Maybe the gaming made her a bit sleepy, her eyes grew heavy, and soon she fell asleep. Hours later, she woke up and played with my game again. I was glad to see her so engrossed. Just as the announcement came that the plane was preparing to land, the father nudged the girl, who reluctantly tried to give the game back to me. But I shook my head. "It's fine. Keep it." The father tried to refuse, but the girl looked a bit happy. Her adorable face made me smile. That was the first game I ever made. I'm glad she enjoyed it so much, so please keep it. I said this to the father, then turned to the girl. "When your brother gets better, play this game together, okay?" With a smile, she nodded vigorously. "Thank you." Her sparkling smile gave me courage. This is why I make things that can captivate people. For this, I'll study hard. With such determination and hope in my heart, I parted from the girl and landed in Japan. It seems I've been lost in memory for quite a while. An announcement that we were about to land came over the intercom. I wonder how she's doing now. I don't know the outcome of her brother's surgery, but hopefully, he's still living well today. With these thoughts, I disembarked from the plane. I headed for the company at my destination, transferring from train to taxi and safely arriving. As I entered and looked around the lobby, "Oh, excuse me. Are you the subcontractor?" a voice called out. I turned to see a young man in his 30s looking at me with a smile. "Yes." As I responded with a startled voice, the man hurriedly explained. "I'm so sorry. I tried contacting you several times but couldn't get through. I have an urgent meeting now. If we could reschedule our meeting to another day, it would really help me out. I'm really sorry, especially since it's our first meeting." Apparently, this man who kept apologizing had mistaken me for someone else. I was puzzled, but just as I was about to correct him. "Hey, Kevin," a woman's voice echoed in the lobby. Then, the man in front of me looked up and turned around. It seems this man was Kevin. "I told you I absolutely have to be at today's meeting." As she approached, the woman was using crutches. Despite the cast on her left leg, she skillfully moved forward with determination. She looked at Kevin with an expression of anger, yet she was incredibly beautiful. Her eyes were wide and double-lidded, with long eyelashes. Her well-shaped eyebrows formed a beautiful arch, adding to her exotic aura. While I was still in shock, a quarrel had already started between Kevin and this woman. "Emily, you just had an accident, right? I told you to take the day off. I can explain everything since I was involved too." The woman, apparently named Emily, retorted. "It's just a fracture. I said I would crawl if I had to. I was the main developer. I absolutely want to present it myself. Kevin, you go ahead with the subcontractor meeting as planned." Saying this, Emily looked at me, her eyes widening as she realized who I was, and started to panic despite her crutches. "Mr. Turner, are you here? I apologize." I quickly responded. No, you're on crutches? Please, take it easy. Are you all right?" Though I was flustered, Emily shook her head and said, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." Then she glared sharply at Kevin. "What are you doing? Greet him. He's Mr. Turner, president from the Japan headquarters." Upon hearing this, Kevin panicked and exclaimed, "What? Mr. Turner from the headquarters? I apologize," and turned to me to apologize. "You didn't know his face. You can't be serious." Emily muttered to Kevin in a low voice. I chuckled. "Don't worry about it. It's only my second time visiting the American branch, and I don't show my face often, so it's natural not to recognize me. But Emily, you seem well informed." When I mentioned this, Emily quickly looked up. "Yes, I've read every interview from start to finish and have been looking forward to meeting you today. You started a company with Vice President Aita Suzuki in Japan, and after your game app hit it big, you set up this American branch." Emily explained my background with sparkling enthusiasm. As Emily mentioned, I had founded an IT company in Japan with Aita, whom I became close to during my university days. We developed several apps and software, and as we continued to grow, one of our games became a hit. Noticing the high number of downloads in the US, Aita and I decided to establish an American branch a few years ago. Emily, who knew my background so well, must be a talented employee. I was involved in the interviews when setting up the American branch, but I don't recall Emily and Kevin. After the setup, I entrusted all HR matters to the HR department here. Probably, Emily joined us mid-career, but I was pleased that such a dedicated employee had joined us. It's a bit embarrassing but also very gratifying. Thank you. Are you participating in the competition later? I'm looking forward to it. I said as I prepared to leave, but then paused. Kevin, was it? Even if urgent matters come up, try not to rudely change the plans of subcontractors. They are important people involved in our app development. I said this gently with a smile, trying not to apply too much pressure. Kevin turned pale, so I quickly added, I'm not angry. Personally, I don't feel too important. I maintain a fairly friendly dialogue with the staff, much like Aita, who appointed me president. At the Japan headquarters, there isn't a strong sense of hierarchy. Especially since neither Aita or I believe in the absolute authority of superiors, our company culture in Japan is relatively lenient. I wanted the American branch to have good communication as well, but it tends to become rigid. I left the scene with a smile, trying to mediate the situation. At the subsequent meeting, I was in for a surprise. The American branch was hosting a competition to develop a new game app. All the entries were interesting, but Emily's app was outstanding. I reviewed her profile and found out she had joined just a year ago. Although her previous job was also in IT, and details were confidential due to non-disclosure agreements, her skills were proven, and she had a high internal rating within her first year. Unsurprisingly, her app was unanimously chosen as the winner of the competition. We held several meetings, including with Emily, to finalize the details, and then the meeting adjourned. As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed, Several of us turned at Emily's cry. Her eyes were directly fixed on me. She seemed to struggle with her words, trembling slightly, so I approached her. Amid other employees, Emily opened her mouth as if gathering all her courage. Mr. Turner, do you have any time during your stay in the US? Faced with her pleading gaze, I felt bewildered. I'd really like to discuss various things with you, Mr. Turner. Could you possibly spare some time for me? Standing there on crutches, shaking, I hastened to respond. Some employees murmured that it was inappropriate, but was it really? Of course, I'd definitely like to hear more from such an excellent employee like you. My schedule is packed, but how about tomorrow night? We could celebrate your victory in the competition as well. As I said this, Emily's cheeks flushed. I felt like I had seen that expression somewhere before. Unable to recall immediately and having other appointments, I exchanged contact information with Emily and headed to my next destination. The next day, to celebrate, I reserved a private room at a Mexican restaurant. Taking Emily's crutches into account, I made sure to arrange for an easily accessible seat. It had been a while since I last enjoyed Mexican foods. Probably, I was more excited than Emily. Sitting down with a nervous look, Emily placed something on the table before even opening the menu. What? I was taken aback when I saw the object. It was the small game console I had made from parts, the first one I ever crafted in my life. Could it be? As I spoke with a trembling voice, tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I finally found you. My name is Emily, the girl you gave this game to on the airplane. You're Adam, right? Like a broken doll, I nodded vigorously. Emily said, thank you for that time. My brother's surgery was successful, and he's still doing well. Her eyes brimming with tears as she smiled. Emily had cherished the game console ever since, often remembering me. As a kind brother, she probably remembered me more fondly than I deserve. Inspired at that moment by the fact that I could create a game from scratch, she decided to pursue a similar path. She studied programming and joined an IT company, working relentlessly. On a whim, she searched for my name on the internet, which she had tucked away in her memory. The search hit on my name as the president of an IT company in Japan, receiving interviews. Adam Turner. The name that appeared when she completed the small game. The photo in the interview article matched the face she vaguely remembered. Then she learned about the establishment of the American branch. Since the mid-career hiring was open, I quickly prepared my resume, scheduled an appointment, and got interviewed. Emily said with a charming smile. As just another employee, she thought she'd never catch the eye of the president of the headquarters. So, she worked furiously. Then, she heard about the competition. Knowing that the president from the headquarters would be visiting, Emily poured all her efforts into developing the app. It was very well done, so, you did it for me. You should have sent an email, I said with a smile. Emily made a face as if the idea were preposterous. Me, send an email to the president of the headquarters? I wouldn't dare. And yet here I am, asking for a dinner like this. Emily bashfully looked down. I thought about improving communication within the American branch. As I pondered, Emily nervously looked up at me. I might as well say it while I'm at it. I've always had a crush on you, Mr. Turner. Ever since I was little. This little game console gave me courage. It was nice to know that she admired me, but I was surprised that her feelings had developed into a romantic interest. So, if you are currently unattached, would you consider dating me? I found myself a bit troubled. I'm sorry, I did think of you when I got on the plane yesterday, but it was more like wondering if you're doing well, or remembering you fondly. It's not the same as the feelings you have for me. I tried to choose my words carefully, but they didn't quite fit right. Besides, you're quite a bit younger than me. I'm an old man, and it might not be a good match. 8 years. As I stuttered and scratched my head, Emily interjected. Back then, I was just a 10-year-old child, but now I'm 34, and there's only an 8-year age gap between us. It's not that significant. Indeed, when put that way, it might just be 8 years. However, as I still hesitated, Emily looked at me pleadingly. If you're not seeing anyone, could we at least give it a try? Will you give me a chance? It was a long-held affection. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to respond. Yet, I am a plain man who has become the president of a Japanese company but has almost no experience with women. She has idealized the kind brother from the plane too much. She doesn't really know the real me. What if she were to find out and say, "You're not what I expected"? That would hurt me too. How pathetic. I thought to myself, but this is just the way I am after 42 years, and there's nothing I can do about it. Let's start by keeping in touch then. I'll be going back to Japan the day after tomorrow, and won't be in America for a while. With the time difference, we might not be able to communicate much. During that time, if you feel that the real me is different from the ideal you have, I hope you can gently distance yourself. When I proposed this rather pitiful compromise, Emily burst into tears of joy. I regretted just a little being so kind to her on that plane. I felt guilty for having bound her to me for so long. Months passed. Contrary to my expectations that she would give up soon, Emily kept in frequent contact. Our text exchanges were sporadic due to the time difference, but there was no blame. When our schedules aligned, we switched to video calls. I'm not a fan of video calls, even for work. I don't like seeing my own face on the screen, even if it's just a small image. Yet, Emily always says handsome when she sees my face. Every time she says it, I feel embarrassed but also genuinely pleased. If I look tired, she notices even through the screen and tries to end the call early to let me rest, saying cute things like, "I'll send you some energy." Talking to her isn't very tiring, and despite being 8 years younger, we get along well. Gradually, I started to like her. I was slowly falling for her sincere affection. I became desperate to see her. 3 months later, I visited America again. I arrived at night, but Emily came to meet me at the airport. We had dinner together at a restaurant inside the airport, then strolled around a bit. Desperate to touch her, I nervously reached out and took Emily's hand. She was surprised but then squeezed back firmly. My heart pounded wildly. Feeling restless but determined, I led Emily to an observation deck I had researched beforehand, where we could watch airplanes. She came with me, sniggling close. The observation deck was chilly and nearing closing time, so it was sparsely populated. We sat down side by side and watched the planes. Mr. Turner, ever since I met you on that plane, I've loved airplanes. She still calls me Mr. Turner. We're not in a relationship, so she makes a point of not mentioning my name. Initially, I felt reassured by that distance, but eventually, I started craving more and felt unsatisfied just being called Mr. Turner. I apologized for something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I'm sorry. It's my fault for being kind to you back then, Emily. You've been trapped by me ever since. As I said this, Emily hurriedly tried to argue. I stopped her. Unless I let go of these feelings, I can't move forward. After realizing how long I'd been holding you back, I was nearly crushed by guilt. I underestimated the feelings of a 10-year-old girl. Emily muttered, looking down. It was all my doing. I just fell for you on my own. Just a slightly precocious girl. Her murmur made me smile a bit. As a form of atonement, I've created an app. I said, sending the file to her email address. Would you try it out? Emily nodded and launched the app. There it was, a nostalgic shooting game. It was the first shooting game I ever made. Emily had been disappointed that the old console no longer worked. So, I revived it as an app. Emily easily completed the game with a few taps. I thought it would be a bit more challenging. She said with a smile, but I looked down. What's wrong? She asked, and I replied without looking up. Just keep looking at the screen, please. After saying that, a small sigh could be heard. I could tell that Emily caught her breath. She must have been captivated by what was now displayed on the app. I did something rather cheesy for me. The screen Emily is looking at right now. It should be displaying. I've decided to come back to America. Will you go out with me? Adam Turner. This message should be appearing along with an image of a bouquet. I had always wanted to return to America. When downloads of our games increased in the US, I proposed setting up a US branch. Aita had noticed my secret desire. When I told Aita about the status of the US branch, he suggested, how about you as the head of the US branch? It was an offer I couldn't refuse, and with a wink, Aita said, you've always wanted to come back, haven't you? Eventually, the decision was made to appoint Aita as president of the Japanese headquarters and a US branch president, who was fluent in Japanese, as vice president. This was to be announced tomorrow. After presumably reading the message, Emily shook me vigorously, and I reluctantly looked up. The message had already disappeared from the app. How about it? I asked, my face flushed, and Emily hugged me tightly. I'm so happy. Really happy. Really, are you coming back to America? Will you go out with me? She had loved me since we were children, and knowing the real me, she was still this happy. It brought me to tears. I wrapped my arms around her back and hugged her tightly. Yes. Sorry for making you wait. Thanks for loving me all these years. I'll definitely make you happy. I'll make up for the 22 years and fill them with happiness. Trembling with emotion, I vowed to Emily. Then, Adam. Emily whispered my name by my ear. Surprised, I looked at her face. She was blushing and smiling. Adam, I love you. I replied with the same words. I love you too, Emily. As the sound of the airplane taking off filled the air, we shared our first kiss. Years later, I can hear our children playing loudly with their phones in the living room. It seems our son has fallen to the floor, perhaps defeated, as our daughter struggles to snatch the phone from his hand, their cries of "give it here" and "no way" mingling. Hey, you've had your turn, right? Let her have it. Emily's voice softly scolds our son. Sulking, he seems to have handed over the phone to his sister. Now, I can hear our daughter's joyous voice. I'm in the study, working while listening to my family. It's a weekend, and I should be at the office due to some pending cases, but I wanted to be near my family, so I'm working remotely. I'm so glad for this convenient world. As I work with a grin, the door to the study opens. Why not take a break? I made cookies. My ever-beautiful wife, Emily, peeks in. Let's take a break. I've been smelling something sweet and getting hungry. Saying this, I put my computer to sleep and stand up. As Emily smoothly enters the study, I kiss her lightly on the forehead. Emily, blushing, returns the gesture with a kiss on my cheek. I wonder if I've managed to make her as happy as she has loved me over the years. Whether she knows my farts or not, Emily always shows me a contented smile. With Emily, no matter what uncertainties we face, I know we can overcome them together. I leave the study, heading to the living room where our children are waiting.